Good evening, Browns fans, and welcome to Gang of Three. We are all here tonight to deal with the coachless nature of the Cleveland Browns after Kevin Stefanski was relieved of that position after 6 years at the helm and arguably more success than any other Browns coach in the expansion era. So welcome to the program. Along with me tonight is Mr. Lane Adkins. How you doing, Lane?
Good. How you doing?
I am doing all right. And Mr. Pete Smith. How you doing, Pete?
We're here. Let's do it.
We're here. Let's do it. So let's dig into this. We're already getting some interesting comments in the chat room. If you are on YouTube or Twitch or even Facebook, please feel free to hit us up in the chat room. We love your chats, your questions and comments, and we use them to help steer the show. So, guys, Jimmy Haslam gave the team approximately 4 months to get it together, says the next 120 days are critical for the franchise. A lot of gobbledygook during Haslam's time and Andrew Berry's time, which didn't really say much, but a couple of things that jumped out at me. One was a question to Andrew Berry about whether the team's talent suggested more than a 5-win franchise this year. And he said it did. Lane Atkins, do you agree with that?
Yes.
You absolutely agree that there's more talent here than a 5-win team?
Yes. They gave away multiple games. They had multiple opportunities that they could have won, and they didn't win, which all relates down to the inexperience of talent, relates to coaching, relates to the whole ball of wax that we call the Cleveland Browns. But yeah, that was a team that could have won more than 5 games, should have won more than 5 games, and however you want to put it, decision was made, and let's go.
All right. We have to live with it now. Pete, same question. Do you agree with Lane that this team has more talent than a 5-win squad?
Yes, in the sense that they gave away 3 games or had 3 games right there for them. But, we could do that the other way too. I mean, they could have easily lost the second Bengals game. They could have lost the Steelers game. There's always that range of outcomes. And if you just go by Vegas, Browns were 4.5, 5.5 win team. They won 5. So, Vegas nailed it pretty much right on the head. So, yeah, they could. But, I think Jimmy Haslam's account of the team is unrealistic, and that's part of why we're here.
You're killed because your quarterback position is absolutely lousy. You get a glimpse of hope because a player makes a few plays. With average quarterback play, this team's success would have been greater than a 5-win team. You can say how you want. You can say that the front office pulled the rug out from under the head coach by, trading Pickett right away, trading Flacco, leaving it to 2 rookies and Brady Zappi. You can call it what you want. Bottom line is this team won 5 games, 8 in 2 years. And while we were led to believe and still believe that there was a process and they were going to work through it, the owner couldn't persevere that process because he wasn't satisfied, embarrassed by the way they lost, embarrassed about what he thought was a lack of production, continuity, improvement, growth, development, however you want to call it. This is a team that could have won more than 5 games. They didn't, and that's why we're sitting here today.
Is there any, Lane, in your opinion, any specific rationale for, other than the win-loss record, for dumping Stefanski? Something that he did poorly, discipline, say, holding on to assistant coaches longer than he maybe should have, things along those lines. The team certainly didn't point to any issues today. They just talked about what a great guy he was. I'm wondering if you see any rationale beyond that win-loss record to get rid of Stefanski.
Well, I believe that there was a question that it had become that was he really that guy that's going to take them to that next level, because they kept wallowing around in mediocrity. made playoffs 2 out of 6 years, 8 games they've won in 2 years. You can say that Stefanski and his staff did well in developing some of these young guys from the 2025 draft, but you can also look at it and say that they've been deficient in developing things in their wide receiver room. You have to wonder at whose call was it with the offensive line issues. Everybody wants to point at Andrew Berry and say that, well, he's the one that puts this roster together and does this and does that. The only problem is that he takes a lot of input and feedback from his head coach regarding the players that he has on this roster. So you're not going to get a clear answer either way. But you have to look at it, and you have to look at and see what's coached, see what's on the field, see who's coaching these players, and see if you're getting growth and development in other areas. You can't say much about the young guys because they grew, developed, and played well. The quarterback issue remains the biggest problem for this team. And they went in here and basically went with 2 rookies for the most part of the season, and then you got what you got. You got rookies playing at the National Football League at this level that aren't the highest caliber talents. And, in some cases you can say, well, I don't know how the hell they won 5 games. And you can realistically say that too. I mean, it just is what it is. I mean, at the end of the day, 5 games wasn't sufficient. It shouldn't be sufficient. 8 wins in 2 years shouldn't be sufficient for anybody. So, to sit here and try to make excuses or try to justify things, you can't, because it's as much on ownership and front office as it is coaching and staff and talent. So it's clear, and even Jimmy Haslam made the comment that what was amazing, that if you go to Rumor Central and see it, we posted in there 3 or 4 days ago, Jimmy Haslam, it was almost like a bullet point of the things he talked about is what we said in Rumor Central that the problem was.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is. And this game is not for long. You have to win. And unfortunately, Kevin Stefanski is the one who's going to pay the price for it.
Well, I'm not sure how long he'll pay the price. He's already of interest to several teams, a couple of whom have quarterbacks. Adam Schefter mentioned Tennessee, also mentioned the New York Giants, both of whom have their quarterbacks, for better or worse, right now. Pete, do you think Kevin Stefanski is going to land a job this year? And if so, do you have any thoughts about how he'll be able to apply what he's learned here at the Cleveland Browns?
I do think he's going to end up in a job. I hope he's smart about which one he takes, because you don't know how many shots you're going to get at this thing. So I hope he's cautious in that regard. And there's a good chance he's going to take a head coaching job that's going to play the Browns next year, and he's going to kick their ass. I mean, straight up. The Browns are going to get beat by Kevin Stefanski in 2026. In terms of applying what he's learned, I mean, he's a really good coach. The biggest thing he needs to apply in terms of what he should learn, he needs to be infinitely more selfish than he was in Cleveland. The biggest mistake I think he made was trusting that anyone was going to have his back on a team that basically went into this offseason and said more defense. And you get to sort of get leftovers on offense. And that's not to say he didn't get good players. Harold Fannon's fantastic. Quinshon Judkins is a really good player. I hope he recovers to be 100%. But everybody went to last offseason saying the same thing. Browns have a really good defense. They need to invest heavily in offense. The 3 biggest moves were on defense. Malik Collins, great signing. They obviously took Mason Graham. They took Carson Sweatshirt. And I'll even add in the Tyson Campbell trade, which is also fantastic. Those are your biggest moves of the entire offseason, and they're all on defense. So, in that way, I look at Kevin Stefanski as being a patsy for the other 2. And look, I'm not mad that Andrew Berry retains his job. I mean, my preference was that they kept everybody into 2026. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Not getting that option, I still would rather keep Berry and the front office as opposed to just cleaning house. I think in a lot of ways, Andrew Berry is your last best chance that Jimmy Haslam will not run this thing into the ground, because he is actually a smart guy and understands what he's doing. The Deshaun Watson debacle notwithstanding. But the biggest problem I see running into this thing is you have to now try to – Kevin Stefanski gets to leave Deshaun Watson, and Jimmy Haslam has to sit here and eat it. And
yeah,
you watched 20 seconds after Kevin Stefanski was fired, he already smelled like roses. That's incredibly, an indictment of the Browns right now. Kevin Stefanski walks out the door and he's immediately hailed as a hero, which I knew was going to happen because he's the one who got the Browns to the playoffs and won a playoff game. Nobody else has done that. He's got 2 11-win seasons. He scored 250 points. The only one other coach on this team's history has ever done that. And all these guys are going, man, he got to do that in Cleveland. Imagine what he's going to do for us, whatever team you insert you think is a competent franchise. We don't have Jimmy Haslam running the team. He's going to be way better for us. So, we'll see what he ultimately chooses. I think they're all really intriguing. I don't love the idea of him going to New York with Joe Shane there. I think that's a little bit cautious. I think that could potentially be a trap. The Falcons situation is really intriguing. Not having the draft pick sucks, but that's a really talented roster. Tennessee, he loved Cam Ward. He's just sitting right there for him. So, I mean,
right.
This is the problem is like people have this awful idea that, the Browns are going to fire Kevin Stefanski and get better for it. They aren't, at least not in the short term. They may eventually get there, but at least right now, Kevin Stefanski is going to go somewhere and be better than the Browns. And that's going to suck, especially if he coaches a team you are going to play and you lose to him, because we just did this with Baker Mayfield and everybody said, oh man, how awful is this situation? Baker Mayfield beat us or whatever. So like there is a world where this works out. I just don't think it's going to be in the short term that people want. And you're not going to compare this to 8 wins in 2 years. That's not reality, because there are people here still carrying a torch for John Buffoon Dorsey as GM and Alex Van Pelt as offensive coordinator and Bill Belichick and all these other guys. They don't remember the crap times. They remember the good stuff. And especially if the Browns come out next year and stink, everybody's going to immediately go, man, we had a coach that got us to the playoffs and won a playoff game in Pittsburgh. We don't have that. And that's where I think people are unrealistic. And even the immediate reaction to the firing, I think there's already people who realized, oh, crap, Jimmy Haslam just pushed the Browns out of a plane without a parachute, and he's expecting Andrew Berry to fix it on the way down. That's a very troubling scenario, which, again, I think it can work. But, I don't think people realize, and we've tried. We have tried to warn people how this job is viewed. It is not positive. It is not high. And there are candidates that, yes, will be in this job. There are also candidates who are going to be like, I will wait for the next one. I will wait for a better job and I will pass. And there will be people who will be very upset and think it's a shot at Cleveland. It's not. It's about Jimmy Haslam. You have to think of this in terms of it's not the Cleveland Browns. It is the Jimmy Haslams that are sort of being on the billboard that these potential coaches are being like, I'm not sure I want to go there.
Yeah. And, you can hardly blame them. And I think one of the other hidden issues here is that we have a very good defensive coordinator, Lane, in Jim Schwartz, and an up-and-coming, highly regarded offensive coordinator in Tommy Rees, who didn't get a lot of time to prove himself as a play caller, but I thought I saw a little bit of a spark when he took over. Lane, our chances of retaining either of those two guys seem minuscule at this point, as much as the Brain Trust said that they loved Schwartz.
Well, it depends on what they ultimately decide to do. I mean, they have Jim Schwartz sitting in their lap. Has he learned from his experience in Detroit? Going back and reliving that and looking at it extremely thoroughly, Jim Schwartz, even though those Detroit teams weren't well, in a couple years he had them playing at a very solid level. Jimmy Haslam loves Jim Schwartz. Really likes him. Really believes that he brought an element to this team that was lacking on the offensive side of the ball, which was toughness, some physicality, some hard-nosedness on the practice field. And I think all those things began to just accumulate to the folder of why Jimmy Haslam saw things differently and wanted to make a move. Am I saying Jim Schwartz is the best candidate to be head coach? Probably not, but I also do believe that this organization wants to keep that defensive continuity that they have, and they see that as a big bonus, and they want somebody to come in here and fix this offense.
Yeah.
So the Jim Schwartz question comes up, and it's going to stay there until it's not. And
Right.
he deserves an interview. He has done things with this defense that makes it stand out. One of the best defenses in the league. And while his unit could be undisciplined at times, besides blowing coverages in the secondary, Jim Schwartz's defense, they played the game. As far as Tommy Rees goes, I just think that there's going to be some difficulty there in retaining, because if you go with the Jim Schwartz, they may end up looking for more dynamic on the offensive side of the ball, somebody that's more proven. But this guy didn't have the full opportunity either. And they're going to have somebody that can come in here that can work and bring a quarterback along, because at some point the quarterback is going to land here. Like Andrew Berry said, it could be a veteran, that stopgap guy. And Jimmy Haslam has yet to give up hope on Arch Manning. That is the guy that they want.
Right.
And right now, with the situation they're in, and you look at them, and you expect this team to be, whoever's the coach, be better than a 5-win team. And if that's the case, it's going to take them out of that element unless they accumulate additional draft capital. They have an opportunity to make that happen. So, all the cards are on the table. It's going to be interesting to see what happens, because I don't think just anybody can walk in here and take this job and be productive and efficient with it. So I'm curious.
The fundamental mistake that Jimmy Haslam's making is misreading what Jim Schwartz is. He's in the perfect role for him right now. And there's a major generational divide between understanding where players are now and where the Jimmy Haslams of the world are. And there were a lot of fans who will love if Jim Schwartz is the head coach, because he's old school. He'll be straight out of like the 60s. The drill sergeant type will run that tough camp. That is not how the world works. Listen to Kurt Signetti talk about how practice works nowadays. It is nothing like that. And if you think that's how it's going to work, you're going to be fundamentally back behind everybody else, because Kurt Signetti's talking about shorter practices, faster practices. We're intense and we get our work in, but we are not here to keep guys here 20 hours a week or 20 hours a day and all this other crap. And fans hate hearing that crap, because they think, well, if a player's on social media or something, he should be grinding right now, even though, of course, they don't hold themselves at the same standard. So on some level, it helps, but it wears on guys quickly. And you need to have that balance. And that's why I worry about Jim Schwartz as being a head coach. I just think generationally it's problematic. And you're seeing what's happening with older coaches in the NFL. They are going real fast. Andy Reid is very good, but Andy Reid is a young man's type of coach in that regard. The old school types are really tough. And that's why the mistake, I think, is you had the setup you wanted, realistically. Jimmy Haslam ultimately got tired of looking at Kevin Stefanski. That's how this thing works. But you had the setup you wanted. You had the old school drill sergeant who's going to be the head coach of the defense and hold those guys in line and get them to do what they're going to do. Even though we're complaining about undisciplined players, and 2 taunting penalties were on his freaking unit. So don't tell me about all this unaccountability and crap when it's the defensive guys that are doing the stuff that you hate. But nevertheless, this is where I think you have to figure out where the league is now. And it's not to say Jim Schwartz can't do it. I think you are going to be a net negative relative to what you just had. And that's the other part about this, is the second Jimmy Haslam fired Kevin Stefanski, all bets are off. They can all be gone. And it's going to be really difficult for them to put together a staff. I think Andrew Berry is actually capable. People disagree. I think Andrew Berry can find a capable candidate for head coach. The challenge is going to be replacing all those guys if they leave the building. Whether you like Tommy Rees or not, the Jason Tarvers, if he walks out the door, the Jacques Césaires, Ephraim Banda's a really good safeties coach. There's a lot down the line. Mike Bloomgren's a really good coach. That's going to be your challenge of replacing all these guys. And yeah, you can sit there, oh man, Bubba Ventrone's bad. Okay, you could have replaced him, but now you have to replace all those guys potentially, and that's a very bad situation for this team to be in. When again, your best answer to everything is just throw money at the problem rather than, necessarily having a great opportunity. Granted, Jim Schwartz, there's a world where he might not want to leave simply because he gets to coach Myles Garrett and the Browns have bent over backwards to give him all the players. Like from that standpoint, Jim Schwartz may be willing to listen to the possibility of staying on as defensive coordinator simply because he's going to sit here and go, I'm going to have a Hall of Fame career type unit for the rest of my days as coach. So that's the big, appeal to him. But him as a head coach, it has a cap. It has a very quick cap. 8-8 was, I think it got to 10-6 once with the Lions, which, certainly would be, there are plenty of Browns fans who would sign up for that. But again, I think people don't understand where the league is now in terms of where coaching's going. And I don't care what level you're talking about.
Right. I'm I'm listening to this and a little bit, disconcerted about, the prospect of replacing Stefanski and improving on them, but they are going to go and search high and low for a new head coaching candidate. Andrew Berry is in charge of that process. Here's what Andrew Berry had to say about his qualifications for head coach. He said, it's not just leadership by position, but I'd say leadership more globally. Because when you hire a head coach, it's someone who has to be able to lead your players, lead your staff, lead your organization, lead through hardship, and lead through crisis. That'll be at the forefront because it's first and foremost a leadership position. The thing that gets me about that, Pete and Lane, is that there's no reference to football. I mean, you could be hiring a chief financial officer or a chief information officer and utter those same exact words, minus the reference to the NFL. Is there any vision on this team for the type of team that they want to be, or are they just going to go out and I'll point this to you, Lane. Is this a smash mouth running team? Is this a defensive team? Is this a passing team? Is this a team that needs to modernize their offense? Any of that coming from the front office, or is it just let's find the best coach we can and he'll fix everything?
Well, you got to first determine who you're going to get. And you're going to have to determine, does he fit that kind of philosophy? What's the philosophy of the coach that you want? You want a coach that's going to play old school AFC North type football and pound the ball, run the ball? Or are you going to get a guy who's more open and more spread and more read option and all? You have to decide what direction you're going. And that depends on the guy that you get, the talent that you have, the coaches that you secure. And that's where the big miss is going to be here with Cleveland, because they had a direction, and while it was slow in process, they had a direction. Now you don't know what the direction is, and you could say that it could be a rudderless ship until they figure it out. Regardless of what anybody thinks, the Browns' job is going to be attractive because there's just not that many of them. Does it mean that you're going to get the number one candidate that's out there if it's the Browns versus whomever? I wouldn't be jumping the Cleveland first above most teams, just because what historically this organization does and is capable of. As far as what Andrew Berry said in his statement, see, that's a perception that people have, because people associate everything with the Browns front office to being analytical, just numbers, nothing to do with football. If anything, the 2025 draft should have showed everybody that this team is football oriented just as well as they do with putting metrics and analytics and everything else involved into the study to help them make the best decision they can make. So, the bullshit that we keep hearing that, well, they don't talk about football. They don't have football guys in the front office. Well, I'm sorry. The guys who are actually on top of the personnel end have football backgrounds. So, just get over it already. Your team has been mediocre. It has sucked, and it has gotten a fan base very disappointed and disgruntled. The only problem is that here you are, you're sitting here today, another Black Monday, and you got another new head coach coming. And this is the one they cannot blow.
Right.
They cannot blow this move. And if continuity makes them feel better and they feel they can have success, so be it. But you better investigate all the options are out there and not just the retread names that are going to get thrown around. There are coaches in this league that are leaders of men and not just bullshit position coaches that got a name because they're attached to coattails. Just do your work, do your job.
Yeah, I think the press conference and what Andrew Berry was saying was in some ways coded language, in that he's basically telling you we're not just going to get the hot coordinator. We're not just going to get, a former NFL head coach. Some of that is setting expectations, which I think they have to. The history, they have never. Hugh Jackson is the most sort of well-regarded candidate this team has hired under Jimmy Haslam. The three most popular candidates by like fans and media: Hugh Jackson, Chip Kelly, and Josh McDaniels. Not one of them can coach for shit. In terms of head coach, Chip Kelly's brilliant in terms of offensive stuff, but whatever. Mm-hmm. But what he's telling you is that don't be shocked if we get a name you've never heard of and hired, because we are trying to get these things, and those things do matter. I think it's a mistake. And as much as everybody wants to sit here and we look at it and we go, man, they've got to get an offensive head coach, I think that's a mistake to look at it that way. You have to get the right coach. And I've mentioned it before, but I will go back to this over and over and over again. One of the best developers of the quarterback position in the history of the NFL was the defensive coordinator, Marty Schottenheimer. You have to get the right man for the job, not just any man for the job. And you don't limit your scope by saying it's got to be an offensive guy. And just based on the history, I've seen all these lists of candidates, and people do this every time, and they never learn. They'll get this list. Oh man, the Browns are going to get this guy who's at the top of the list. He's going to get the top coordinator, and then by the end of the search or by the middle of the search, they've crossed out about 8 names, and then they're looking at the guys who they're actually going to get. And that's not to say it's a necessarily a bad process. I mean, obviously the Steelers did really well by not going with Ken Wisenhunt and Russ Grimm and finding Mike Tomlin. But I think that's the process the Browns are going to go to, is they're going to try to find that next guy. So if you're sitting there going, oh, they're going to go with the obvious guy, I don't think they will. And they're going to interview Jim Schwartz, and I could be dead wrong. That also told me I didn't think they're going to hire Jim Schwartz. That's just my honest opinion. I don't think he's going to end up being the head coach of this team. And part of the reason I don't think he's going to end up the head coach of this team is because if you just run it back with Jim Schwartz as is, then why the hell did you fire Kevin Stefanski in the first place? You could have just kept everybody and done that. So I think they, in doing this, they want to actually make a real change. Now, Jim Schwartz could end up being the coordinator and all this other stuff, but I think they want to make real change and not just sort of bump Kevin Stefanski off the top, put Jim Schwartz there, and just run it back with the same staff. I don't think that's realistic, and I think a lot of people are sitting there hoping that I don't know why they would have hoped for that and not just retained the staff in place. It was there. So I think those are the things they're going to have to prepare for. But I had no problem with the statement that Andrew Berry made. I think he's 100% right, but they've got to stick a landing on it.
They absolutely do. This process, Lane, strikes me as, very broad. I've seen a lot of names thrown out there right now. I don't know what the Browns will narrow it down to, but again, the lack of vision for this team keeps coming up on me in terms of saying, what type of coach are they going to target? Are they going to look at everyone and say, this guy's the smartest, or this guy is, has the best leadership quality, or, what helps them narrow the field to the guy they want?
Well, are you asking from a fan's point of view, or what an organizational type of point of view is? Because if you're looking at a fan point of view, everybody wants to see a guy that's animated and noisy and physical and tough, and
they want to cast an actor. Right. Straight up, they want to cast it. They watch TV, they watch movies, they want that.
and they want Mike Vrabel. They see that guy, and that's the guy it just everybody just encompasses to because he was here in Cleveland, and the Browns let him escape. It didn't work that way, but so whatever. But now, as an organization, if you're looking for real change, if you're looking to fundamentally change your organization, okay, you're not looking for the ultimate retread that has been there, had some success, not highly successful, and has other failures following. So that could say, you don't want Mike McCarthy. Mike McCarthy, while he won games in Green Bay, there was issues in Dallas, and this leave him way out of the way. Then you can get into guys like the Kubiak, which they followed down that offensive tree. But again, you're going to get into a situation is that young guys, are they culture guys? Are they guys who change something? That is the question, because you're going to need a guy who can come in here and lead a group. Don't pinpoint this looking at, well, we got to get an offensive guy because our quarterback situation sucks and we got to develop a quarterback. You need a leader. You need a fundamental leader to grasp this locker that can not only work with your general manager, but demand excellence from there too. Because that area has to feed this team, feed this coaching staff. So you have to have somebody that can have some fundamental value in doing that. Right now, I'm just looking at it, and one guy that jumps off to me, and is Thomas Brown. This guy has been effective. He's a leader. And you can look and say, you talked about the list of all these candidates you see. That's the problem. People just generalize and look at the bullshit lists that people make out because those are the names that are out there. And not those 3 or 4 guys that are going to be behind those scenes who are leader of men. And that's where they're going to end up driving to. Unless somebody in this group that is no names that are out there that are not tied to the Cleveland Browns in any way yet, as of this morning, is that type of leader and that type of dynamic. Right now, we just don't know. Over the next, 48, 72 hours, we're going to start to get a better feel on what they feel or what they're thinking. So, right now, that's just the way it is. You can look at all the lists of names and say, oh, yeah, this is a nice pick, this is a good pick. Wait till you get past that and look beyond those names, because that is where most likely this hire is going to come from.
Right, Pete. Lane mentioned one name there. Are there any names here that jump out to you that, among the dozens that have been thrown out by, journalists looking to, or, people who write copy looking up lists of who's currently unemployed or who the latest hot coordinator is? Are there any names that jump out at you that, you would get excited about?
There's a couple. And the fact that Kevin Stefanski got let go, and suddenly it becomes very interesting. The Giants makes one of them maybe more available and potentially a fit for the Browns than we may have thought, which is Vance Joseph, the Denver Broncos defensive coordinator. He's done a really good job there. There was all this talk that there was going to be a package deal of Vance Joseph and potentially the former quarterback that's now a quarterback's coach. They're going to New York and just setting up shop. The reason I mentioned Vance Joseph is because if you were going to move on from Jim Schwartz, Vance Joseph runs a scheme that's very similar to the Browns, except I would argue better. He does his details and how they cover. They don't have a lot of coverage busts. They really, really, really good coverage. They play excellent defense. He's really smart. That's one. One other guy, I would say there's 2 guys with Ohio connections, which I think are going to at least be brought up. And that's not to say that the Browns will interview them because they have Ohio connections, but they might be interested in the job because they have Ohio connections. One of them is Chris Shula, the defensive coordinator for the Rams. He has, obviously has the name, and God, we hope talent skips a generation in that scenario in terms of being a head coach. He has done a really good job with the Los Angeles Rams. A little bit different in terms of scheme and stuff. The other that jumps out to me that also has Ohio connections and the reason I like him is because of the range of jobs he's had, which is the special teams coordinator for the Houston Texans, Frank Ross. Frank Ross, one, he's a Canfield kid. For those who care, he is a Hall of Fame player for John Carroll University. He was a quarterbacks coach at John Carroll University before he ended up getting into the league. He's been on the scouting side. He was with the New England Patriots as a scout. He was with the Indianapolis Colts as a position coach, and he's run one of the best special teams units in the league for the last several years with Houston Texans. And I don't know how good he is necessarily as a leader for all the stuff we're talking about, but I am intrigued by guys who have had that much experience and that many sort of opportunities to work in different fields, because I do think that range of knowledge can be really beneficial for somebody to then be in a leadership position, not because, he's been a scout that's going to make him be able to be a scout necessarily, but he may have an understanding of what guys do in that realm and be able to give them information that's going to be useful for them doing their job. Or, the fact that he's been a quarterbacks coach does appeal to me in the sense that, look, man, you got to get somebody who can at least look at a quarterback and know what one looks like, whether or not you want him to actually be the guy specifically coaching them or not. But I do think range of experience is valuable from that standpoint. And like we just mentioned, between those names, Vance Joseph is the biggest name, and Shula's last name carries a lot of weight. But Thomas Brown, to build on what Lane was talking about, for people who don't remember, he was the interim head coach for the Chicago Bears after they fired Eberflus. He did a pretty good job finishing out the year there and keeping that thing afloat. Obviously, they knew who they wanted in hiring Ben Johnson, but Thomas Brown impressed a lot of people with his handling of that situation, and now he's currently with New England as the tight ends coach / passing game coordinator. So I hope people don't immediately just write him off and go, well, this guy's not he's not the offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator. And that's part of why I think Barry's messaging was as specific as it was, because I think a lot of people are immediately going to assume that if the Browns don't hire a defensive coordinator or an offensive coordinator or a former head coach, that they're going to get a bad hire. That's not how that works. But I think it's why I've been sort of parsing through this so far as not the obvious candidates, guys that I think are a little bit further down, because I think, look, I mean, the bottom line is like Andrew Berry, and people are going to hate this, he's trying to find the next Kevin Stefanski. I mean, really, he'd like to find the next Sean McVay if he can do it, but they want to find a guy who's most likely going to be a first-time head coach, maybe second if they get a guy like Vance Joseph, and develop them into being that guy. Like, I think that's the thought process here.
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting process to watch. Lane, from your perspective, Andrew Berry's been given the key coordinator role in coming up with a new GM. He's going to lead the search and all that. I assume he's going to have some consulting type of help. What do you anticipate Haslam's role to be in all this? Is he going to get involved in it, or is he going to go off and look at blueprints?
No, he's going to absolutely get involved in it. He is going to speak to candidates, maybe not all of them, but he is going to speak to candidates, especially when it gets to a serious stage. And due to the situation that the Browns are in, I don't blame him. I would want to hear from the guy that I'm getting ready to invest all this money in to lead my organization, my team. So he's going to get involved. I mean, he's not going to sit there and, talk X's and O's and, figure out that Coach 1 is better than Coach 6. He's not going to do that. But he's going to be involved. And I don't really blame him. I would want to hear from the candidates when you start getting towards the end of the process, just to get a feel, just to have an idea. I don't think that I mean, ultimately, it's going to be his decision because he's the one who writes the checks. But I don't feel it's going to be a situation that Jimmy Haslam is going to tell Andrew Berry that I don't like your choice. I want this guy. I don't think it's going to go that way. I think it'll be a very interesting process. I think the process is going to be improved because there's going to be less people in the middle of it that have different type of thoughts, and I think you're going to get more of a football feel in this process than you may have in something else. So Jimmy Haslam's going to be there. He's always going to be there until he's not.
Now, Pete, I haven't been keeping track of NFL-wide news. I've just been focused on Stefanski and the Browns over the last 24 hours. So excuse me if I throw out a name that's ludicrous, which I probably will. But there are a couple of current head coaches whose, rumors, there are various rumors and buzzards flying around. Mike McDaniel's one of them. Mike Tomlin's another. John Harbaugh's another. Are those guys you would look at?
Mike McDaniel, no. And he's not going to get fired this year anyway. But no. And this is where people drive me nuts with the accountability crap. He's been one of the least accountable head coaches in the NFL. He's a really, really smart guy. Mike McDaniel is a legitimately brilliant offensive mind. But it's been a circus in Miami. After in his fourth year as head coach of the Miami Dolphins, he came in July and said, we're going to do accountability this year. After which already told me he was screwed. Like dead man walking the second he said that. Then after week 1, they lost. Bradley Chubb came out and said players were doing their own thing on defense. Like it's a wrap right there. Like people are mad about like the wristband and all this other crap. Imagine the week or weeks of coverage this would be getting if players came out and said, "Yeah, we just did our own thing on defense. We didn't listen to the coaches. We just did whatever we wanted." Tua threw the entire team under the bus in October because they don't listen and they don't care. Like, no. As far as Tomlin goes, look, I think if and when he decides to step away, I think he's going to go to TV before he does anything else. And just personally, look, Mike Tomlin is a fantastic culture head coach. He's a fantastic leader. But like in the same way that I would say that just because you hire a head coach who's necessarily a defensive guy doesn't mean that's the only thing they do. But Mike Tomlin has been a head coach for decades now, and he cannot build an offense. They can't do it. His hires suck on that side of the ball. So if we're worried about assistant coaches, he's been bad. And there's some restrictions with being the Steelers head coach. Once you hire a guy, you're playing out the contract. So you're stuck with some of the guys you've hired. But that has been a disaster in terms of the results on the offensive side of the ball. They have gone, like something like 70 to 80 games without scoring 14 points in the first quarter. The Browns did it twice this year, I think. This offense did it twice. As far as John Harbaugh, he's fantastic. Like, I think he made a very questionable hire in his defensive coordinator this year. That could ultimately hurt him quite a bit. I think he hired somebody who was a little too close to the family in that regard, and that may have been a mistake. And they are feeling the brain drain, obviously, still dealing with the loss of Mike McDonald, who is a fantastic coach. But John Harbaugh has done a really, really good job. And, that is one where I could totally see the Browns being interested, but I don't see him leaving the Ravens yet. Maybe after another year, if they struggle badly, I think they're going to make a couple changes within the coaching staff. But I think they're going to write off a lot of this year on Lamar Jackson being hurt and some of the other injuries they've had, as opposed to John Harbaugh's not getting it done, or John Harbaugh's not good, even if maybe he forgets that Derrick Henry's on his team in the fourth quarter of too many football games.
Let's shift gears a little bit. Before we do that, I just want to point people to the duck that is in the upper left-hand corner. The duck in the upper left-hand corner is surrounded by a QR code. You use your phone or whatever to scan that, and that will take you to the OBR subscription page, where we are running a 75% off special. Remember that number, 75% off special for the next 24 hours. So you've got a day to go and grab an OBR subscription at 75% off. And we'll move on from there. All right, let's talk about Andrew Berry's comments about the quarterback, Shedeur Sanders. Gonna be interesting to see how that situation develops. Andrew says, we're going to do our work on the quarterback market. It's too important of a position. It's something that has to be solidified. I can't sit here and tell you whether the solution for the starter in 2026 is internal or external. You think that by making that statement, Pete, he's telling you that the answer is not in the building?
Correct. He said, this is hilarious for any number of reasons, because the people who love Shedeur Sanders have insisted that Kevin Stefanski has been working against this kid from the word go. Stefanski did everything in his power to make this kid work.
Yep.
The second he's out the building, and the Browns are already calling the Shedeur Sanders who people assumed was Barry's guy. I don't know if that's because he's black. I don't know if that's because he's not Dylan Gabriel or whatever. The second Kevin Stefanski got out of the building, Shedeur Sanders is described as a work in progress, and the quarterback may be internal or emphasis bold external. Told you everything you need to know. Like, all bets are off with this guy. Like, and that's not to say that they're going to throw Shedeur Sanders away, but he's not the guy. He is a guy, and a guy could be developed into a really good quarterback. Maybe that works out. He could also be traded. He could also be cut. And this is the problem that people had. And we talked about this, and we said, don't assume that just because Kevin Stefanski, if they move on from him, this is going to be great for Shedeur Sanders. It resets him in many ways. He is back to being a guy, except there's even less attachment to him because the new guy may come in and go, I'm not dealing with this crap, and move on immediately. So, this is where I sit here and laugh at this whole thing, because the second Kevin Stefanski got out of the building, we're already talking about getting a new quarterback, which was clear as day. And that's not to say that I like Shedeur Sanders and what he can be, but he and Dylan Gabriel are essentially on even footing at this point. In terms of what they really mean. Shedeur Sanders is slightly ahead because he's played and had a little bit more success, but now, they are no longer really third and fifth round picks anymore. They are two quarterbacks that are on the roster, and the new coach may decide he doesn't want either one of them.
Talk to me about quarterbacks, Lane. Pete's opinion makes a lot of sense to me, but is this team going to go figure out a strategy for getting a quarterback before they hire a coach?
Well, when you have four, you have none.
Right.
And that's the way you should look at this, because that's what the reality is. Andrew Berry just came out and stated what many people who look at this game without rose-colored glasses believe. That the Browns quarterback position is a very troubled area. And it was good that he came out and commented and committed right from the jump. It put everybody on notice that, no, this isn't going to be your Shedeur Sanders, rookie quarterback, 7 games. We won a few. Lowest rated quarterback in the NFL as your penciled in starter and go from there. What it did do, if anything, was the firing of Kevin Stefanski, as Pete said, was more of a reset. Because now that 7-game time, personal growth, experience, and what they were building on, or what they were trying to build on as a staff with him, is now going to be out the window. Now you will have a guy who started 7 games. You don't have any idea what this new head coach is going to want. And if I was walking into this job, if the strings were being attached, I wouldn't take this job. Because you have to have a quarterback at some point in this league, and there has to be a plan. And whoever's going to get this opportunity, when they're in the interview process, they are going to ask Andrew Berry, What is the plan at quarterback? That is going to be one of the first and foremost questions that comes out of a head coach's mouth of potential. And right now, anybody who wants to sit back and say that, Shedeur Sanders is your starter, he's earned that right, he hasn't earned nothing. He's earned that he was a raw rookie with a lot of development to do that flashed and showed some good things, and he also showed a lot of bad, as rookies will do. So the offseason is going to be important, and Andrew Berry made it a point saying that, internal, external, looking at a veteran coming in. It's obvious that there's not a self-satisfaction sitting in Cleveland that they have their quarterback riddle salt. And that is the proper way to put it. Regardless of the noise that you're going to get from the outside, you don't have a quarterback yet. And you keep swinging until you get that quarterback. Yep. Now, interestingly, is going to be, now that Kevin Stefanski is out of the equation, and people aren't going to want to hear this, and listen to this very closely. Number 4 can now slowly incorporate into the process, because the Browns have the ultimate basis of saying that, hey, this guy, they've already been building it, talking about how well he's done and how good he's been in the room. Deshaun Watson, if anything, will have his greatest opportunity in Cleveland now. At least for one season, at least for a couple months, to show that he has any kind of value. Nobody wants to see it. Nobody wants to hear it. But now that opportunity is presented because the head coach is gone. Everything associated with the demise of Deshaun Watson that isn't Deshaun Watson's fault is now eliminated. Right or wrong, now you have to, in the back of your mind, seriously consider, what's Deshaun Watson's role going to be? Because you're still stuck with him for a year.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see how they wash their hands with that situation. Or do they let him compete and say, hey, he's changed. This is who he is. And we got an offensive system that works for him. So there's a lot of moving parts here that we're going to see in the coming months that are going to make it interesting.
The variable there is that Deshaun Watson has to completely reinvent himself as a quarterback. He has destroyed his lower body. So he cannot be that guy anymore. It's not to say he can't ever move. But I suspect it's going to look like Aaron Rodgers trying to scramble away from Ravens defenders for the most part. He has to reinvent himself as a pocket quarterback first and foremost. I don't know if he can do that. I've never seen any evidence that he can be that guy. He loves to move and he loves to run, and he's going to try to, put that foot in the ground and see what accelerate comes. And the 3 ACL tears and now the Achilles re-rupture, there's nothing there. So he's got to be a completely new quarterback. And he's got to prove he can do that, which is why I immediately assume this is not going to work. And he's basically going to be, a prop that just sits there and waits until he's ultimately going to be cut in the next offseason. I don't doubt your point, but I just don't think that physically it's going to work in the way that anyone would expect. He'll get a shot. He'll get out there, and all of a sudden people are going to go, oh my God, he can't move. And he's never been a guy who's been real good at that. And is he willing to evolve? The answer to that, to this point, is he's, from what we've seen, he's still in 2020. The game is in 2025. He's still in 2020. And until he makes that decision, until he really, resolves to evolve into a new quarterback and now reinvent himself into a completely different quarterback, it ain't going to matter. So he's going to be a $46 million assistant coach until otherwise.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see because it's going to come down to who is the guy who comes in and is the head coach of this team. He may not want to deal with any of this, and he may tell them, if you're forcing this on me or you're forcing that on me, I'm not the guy for you. Because even though it's one of 32 jobs that are the most coveted jobs in the world, there's still some guys out there who are going to say no because they don't want their career thrown in a dumpster fire because of being decisions forced upon them. So while I do see Deshaun Watson and that that opportunity and thought process very possible. I wouldn't expect it to work, but we've seen stranger things, and that's why we said we just have to sit here and wait it out. And let's get to that time when they're on the practice field in very late spring and see if you got a legitimate quarterback coach and a legitimate quarterback somewhere.
It's going to be fascinating the next 120 days, as Jimmy Haslam puts it. But Pete, when training camp starts, do you expect to see Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, both of them, still hanging around in orange and brown?
Yes, unless somebody comes up with an offer that's too good to refuse now. The reality is that I think the best play is going to be essentially hoping that one of them produces a Kenny Pickett type trade.
Yeah.
Well, and there's two benefits. There's two reasons you would hold on to them. One, they can get better. Like, let's be honest. I mean, they could be a completely different quarterback in 6 months from now. The order of how the Browns deployed their quarterbacks had a lot to do with the success, in my view. If Shedeur Sanders had started out against the Vikings as opposed to Dylan Gabriel, I suspect Dylan Gabriel would have finished the season. And Dylan Gabriel may have looked better than Shedeur Sanders did in those last couple of games. Maybe he wouldn't have. But either way, you're going to want to see what those guys can do and develop. And then if everybody can stay healthy, which includes Deshaun Watson, I mean, when he enters the field, you're going to have to decide if that collective groan is fans or his knees. If everybody's healthy and there's a team that has an injury like Aiden O'Connell last year and they call up, I mean, this is the thing. Teams call – people don't want to believe this, but teams called about Dylan Gabriel last year with interest. But if there's a deal to be made, and you're probably not going to get the investment that you paid for it, unfortunately, but you're going to be able to get something for it, that you can move a guy. Hell, I'd be waiting for Mike McDaniel to call based on Dylan Gabriel, basically the same quarterback they have there. But either way, I think you're going to wait, play it out, see if an offer comes along, and then move one of them. But if not, you're probably going to end up cutting somebody. But I think at some point they'll make a trade.
Yeah, I guess that would be interesting to see if that develops. But I guess the question is, as the quote was that I just threw up on the screen, that the new coach will want their own quarterback. Are we just basically laying on hold until that coaching decision's been made?
Well, I think you're on hold regardless until you get it through free agency and the draft and everything. I right now, the last thing that you're going to get an answer on, any kind of definition, is the quarterback position. Because, one, you got to get your head coach, then you got to get in the free agency and then the trade market. To see if anything's there that develops there before you even get to the draft. So this quarterback thing is going to be a work in progress. It's nothing that's going to happen immediately. You can bet that the minute that they hire this head coach, that work is going to start with that entity. It's already happening inside the building with who's in position in Cleveland right now and their staff. And it was obvious in the comments that Andrew Berry made. But as far as the quarterback and that solution or what's next, that's going to be down the road a bit. So everybody can beat their head against the wall and get all excited and talk about quarterback, and it's going to be Joe Blow and his sister Josephine Schmo. It's going to come down to, once they get everybody together, get a staff, get in the free agency, get in the trade market, and then decide what you're going to do in the draft. You're not going to have any immediate resolution here.
All right. Brian K. asks, blaming owners is crazy. If you don't like the owner, change team, folks. What Browns owner have the fans ever liked? Well, I'm not going to change a team just because I don't like the owner. But I think there was one. I think they liked Paul Brown, although McBride owned the team in the early years and all that, and ultimately sold it to Modell. But they really liked Paul Brown, who was the de facto owner. And since then, you've had Art Modell, you've had Al Lerner, who was mixed up in the move to Baltimore and didn't get a rousing ovation from some people when he was named, Randy Lerner, and Jimmy Haslam, who was greeted warmly. If I remember, the initial press coverage of him was pretty positive. These guys have worked their way into being disliked, I guess is my point. That it's this lack of success means that you don't like the owners. If Jimmy Haslam opens up this new dome and the team is winning 14 games a year, then I think that his PR will turn around remarkably quickly. But you disagree, Pete?
I'll just tell you, the Kansas City Chiefs owner is not popular ever. They do not like him. Look, but the bottom line is that the teams that have been consistently good year in and year out, that sustain the test of time, they generally have good ownership, and that's how it works. Or they're the Packers, who incidentally don't have an owner and run really well. Well, that there's something to be said for that. But say what you will, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and at this point, you do start to wonder: is it actually becoming a hindrance rather than a benefit? They've had 3 coaches in 50 years. They've won a whole lot of Super Bowls with that formula. The Dallas Cowboys were, Tom Landry was the winningest coach in NFL history forever and ever and ever. Then Jerry Jones gets the team, and they won 3 Super Bowls, and then they haven't done anything since. Like, there's a through line with these teams, and Jimmy Haslam gets in his own way. I mean, who guaranteed? You don't have to go any further than Deshaun Watson, who guaranteed the contract. He had every opportunity to just be like, I'm not doing this. I'm not gonna guarantee this money, and the deal doesn't happen. He's in Atlanta or New Orleans or whatever, and we never have to deal with it. But the fact is, he cannot help himself, and he makes the call. And it's not like, we are, democratically electing to fire Kevin Stefanski. Ultimately, it's one guy who gets to say at the end of the day, I don't like you anymore, and I'm tired of seeing your face, so I'm going to get somebody else to do it. And we're sort of left to roll with this. But Dan Gilbert gets credit, at least in Cleveland, because he won a championship. He's certainly not perfect by any stretch, but when you don't win, who else is there to hold accountable? I mean, even Jimmy Haslam, it's empty to say, well, I'm the reason I'm holding myself accountable. What is that? What the hell does that mean? Are you gonna fire yourself? Are you gonna sit out for 5 years and we have to you come back and maybe we have an organization like this is the problem. Is like he can say, I screwed up, but then he comes back and does the next thing. I mean, when we got to the regime we have now, the whole thing was I learned all these stupid mistakes, and then he makes the bigger one. I think right now, honestly, I think the Titans owner is going through her early Jimmy Haslam phase. We'll see if they come out of it, but and may hire Kevin Stefanski to fix it real quick. But I have no issue with people who are mad at ownership because let's go a step further. Ownership is making taxpayers foot the bill for for a substantial part of his stadium. He's a billionaire. Like, is there any other reason you need than saying that people, taxpayers, should have to pay for this for people who are never going to be able to afford to set foot in his stadium, and he's going to collect all the rewards? Like, come on, let's be honest. Like, you have every reason to be contemptible of these people.
I did go and grab my unclaimed funds before Jimmy could get his hands on it. I have to admit that, and I would suggest everyone listening try to do the same thing with if you have any unclaimed funds. But at any rate, I think we're going to wrap it up now. Please remember 75% off an OBR subscription through tomorrow. So you've got a narrow window of opportunity to get inside on the OBR VIP service over the course of the next day. So please jump on that. Want to thank you, Pete and Lane, for your insight, as always. Helps cancel me out. I appreciate that. And we will see you again next week on Gang of Three. Good night, everybody.